Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to welcome you all to the symposium Beyond the Eurocentrism, Rethinking the Architectural Canon. My name is Golnar, and I work in AA Archives photographic collection. Not only after joining AA as an archivist, but also before moving to London in Iran, where I was mostly engaged with urban plannings and designs. I have always been eager to research to history of contemporary architecture. I have been conducting this kind of research related to the contemporary of architecture in Iran for more than 15 years, which led to production of 2 books. And as someone working in an educational institute, I have been always fascinated by how knowledge travel and intersects. Therefore, I see this symposium as an excellent opportunity to meet and discuss my interests with many scholars and researchers and share our interests together. So, and also, I would like to take a moment to express my gratitude to everyone who has been a part of this journey for so far and has helped me turn this symposium to a reality. I'm eagerly anticipating a day full of inspiring, thought-provoking discussion, which will broaden our horizontal and challenges our perspectives. The symposium aims to deepen to knowledge of modern history of architecture in MENA regions, Middle East, and North Africa. I examined the role of this symposium examined the role of the Euro-American Architectural Educational Institution curriculum, culture, and value in the evolution of architecture in the MENA region. Essentially, students from the region who study in these kind of institutes adopt the culture, method, cultures, and values, as well as a concept of modernity or the meaning of a good architecture. So when these architects or these students come back to their countries, these students' knowledge of architecture and the interpretation of a good architecture have led to a contemporary transformation of architectural landscapes in the region. However, these changes have taken place with a different context and layout that is different from what is established in Europe. So we organized this symposium with 3 sessions, each with 3 speakers. And first, we have historical perspective session that we will examine how European education institutes shaped the architectural canon in the MENA region. Then we have a break, lunch break, and then we will have the contemporary perspective session, where speakers will discuss the challenges and opportunities that architects face when returning to the region after studying abroad. This session will also explore how their experiences in abroad shape their approach in architecture in their home countries. Thanks to Torange for chairing this panel. And then again, after a panel, we will have our final session that will be institutional perspectives, where we'll examine the pedagogical methods employed in Euro-American institutes and their impact on the perspective and approach of architects in the Middle Eastern and North Africa. Nick will chair this session. And finally, we wrap up our symposium discussion, and Sylvia will moderate a roundtable with the speakers from all sessions. Yes, that's it. And I just wanted to say that please being active and engaged to discussion and ask questions, and in this way we can have a more interesting kind of symposium. So I'm chairing the first session. the difficult things. So, this session is about the historical perspectives, and I can say that in the world's contemporary architectural history literature, the architectural developments of countries in this region are generally examined in a very cursory manner. In other words, we are still faced with the same criticisms that in 1979 Edward Said in his book mentioned regarding the way the Western perceived the East in 18th or 19th centuries. Unfortunately, we haven't made much progress since then. The architecture of this region is often introduced in world historical history books in just a few paragraphs or few chapters, with possibly one or two mistakes in the building's introduction and its architects, or in understanding the regions and the reasons for the development of the architecture. Meanwhile, the same book highlights individual Western architects and their iconic architecture in great detail across different periods of his life in separate chapters. However, these viewpoints have been recognized as flawed, and architectural scholarship recently have challenged the accepted canon based on other theories such as post-colonial or feminism, or etc. The general view of the history of architecture in these countries still continue, in the MENA region, still continue and has seldom been passed over by historians and architects. It may be helpful to approach the region architecture in a thematic manner, taking into account its original mainstream trends and tendency. Delving into separate buildings, architects, and related objects to get close to understanding the genuine reasons and contexts. I assume these studies have a mutually beneficial impact. Not only do they help us understand the architectural history of MENA countries, but also shed light on the gaps in the architectural history of Euro-American countries as well. It's very odd that despite the proximity of 20th century architecture, we do not have enough knowledge to determine what exactly occurred in that area, in the MENA region. So with this brief introduction, I just want to invite our speakers, Mehrdad, Hamed, and Mohammed. Please join us. Mehrdad is an artist, writer, and director. He was previously artist, director for 30 Bird Production as an interdisciplinary performance company. He joined Public Works in 2022 as a director. Mehrdad is a diploma unit tutor at AA for Unit 2, Reclaiming the Commons. His PhD thesis is entitled Performance as Surplus Material, Exploring Immigrations, Genders, and Spatial Performance in the Context of Interdisciplinary Practice.
As mentioned in the introduction by Gonna, I am not an architect, but I work with architects in the context of creating performative, educational, and site-specific events. I'm also from Iran, where I have experienced full force the advent of what was referred to as Western modernity, which was then supplanted by the Islamic Revolution in 1979. So I consider myself to be a child of imported modernity and a child of the revolution. At the same time, I'm an immigrant. So to address today's theme, I'm going to try and tackle Eurocentrism and modernity head-on, whilst at the same time having a dialogue with some of the work going on here at the AA by students, which, in my opinion, challenges the assumptions and mechanisms of Eurocentrism. I'll begin with a few assumptions. In his book, Recasting Iranian Modernity, Kamran Mateen argues that there are 4 assumptions to Eurocentrism. The historical assumption assumes that modernity has emerged from within Western Europe only. It is endogenous and autonomous to Europe. This leads to the second assumption, the normative one, which is that Europe is superior to the rest of the world. It has exclusive access to modernity, to the way it has developed and appeared, and therefore it is in the privileged position of having knowledge that the rest of the world lacks. The third assumption follows almost automatically from the first two. Because of Europe's exclusive knowledge and superiority, it behaves as if modernity and any institutions associated with it can be applied to the rest of the world universally. In other words, it is assumed that European modernity stands as an ideal for the rest of the world. This is called the prognostic assumption. And finally, the stadial assumption declares that the rest of the world will in time catch up with Europe through different stages, leading to a homogeneous global space inhabited by an essentially European sociality. So Eurocentrism is therefore a specifically internalist mode of understanding modernity that begins and ends with Europe. The rest of the world are supposed to reenact this internalist and at the same time universal European modernity until they eventually get there. In order to be able to do this, they need to be educated to acquire the tools that would enable them and their human spirit to progress and reach such a destination. I use the word spirit advisedly here because this takes us back a few centuries to the 17th century and the appearance of the book Sketch for a Historical Picture of the Progress of the Human Mind, or sometimes it's translated as Human Spirit, by Marquis de Condorcet. A philosopher and revolutionary activist who played an important role during the French Revolution in setting up an educational system based on the fundamental tenets of the Enlightenment. Now, in his book, Condorcet argued that the past revealed an order that could be understood in terms of the progressive development of human qualities, showing that humanity's present state and those through which it has passed are a necessary constitution of the moral composition of humankind. So this relationship between the present and the past is an important aspect for the construction of the European identity, which needs a series of others at different stages of development beneath itself. These others have been referred to as primitive, backward, uncivilized, colonized, developing, and other such words that place the other in a nearer or further stage to the ideal of European identity. In fact, in April 1792, Condorcet presented a project for the reformation of the education system, aiming to create a hierarchical system under the authority of the expert, who would work as the guardians of the Enlightenment and who, independent of power, would be the guarantors of public liberties. The project was judged to be contrary to republican and egalitarian virtues, handing the education of the nation over to an aristocracy of savants or aristocracy of sages. Condorcet himself was arrested because he dared to have such a proposal and eventually reportedly poisoned in prison. But a few years later, the education system in France was basically based on his proposal. A very much top-down process. So, in contrast to an aristocracy of sages, I would like now to refer to a project in Diploma Unit 21 at the AA called Here by Yambo Lee. I mentioned this project both for the way it has been conceived and also for a few interesting reactions that it inspired. So the aim of this project is to explore different ways of having a spiritual experience. This rectangular candle is the result of a situated journey through a number of selected churches in London. At each church, Yambo Lee collected a piece of wax from the church candles. He recorded certain details of the journey, such as which bus he took and what time he traveled at, which walk path he went through, and which churches he visited. He created the rectangular candle out of the leftover waxes he collected from each church. The candle was also injected with perfume, another of Yambo Lee's interests. So this object was the result of an exploration, a journey that involved buses, walk paths, churches, candle wax, time measurement, and perfume. There's an unevenness about this combination. And Yambo has also mentioned that he would like to explore the idea of aromas and smells further by asking other collaborators to measure aromas and smells in different spaces. One response to this project was to criticize Yambo's focus on churches as one source of spirituality. It was said that such an attitude favors a Christian approach, ignoring a diversity of other religious and non-religious versions of spirituality. In my opinion, what this point of view misses is that it was the uneven combination of activities, materials, and journeys, and their interpenetration that the spiritual was being explored through, not in their vertical and hierarchical meaning. The pieces of wax collected from the churches did not metaphorically represent the spirituality of each church. If anything, it was more like a raid, cutting away surplus material, surplus wax. It was everything around this activity that provided the possibility of a series of combinations, irrespective of what spirituality is supposed to be according to a particular canon. In that sense, the project here does the very opposite of a Eurocentric approach by avoiding the vertical construction of an identity, by avoiding placing itself within an evolutionary history of spirituality and allowing instead for elements to combine in an uneven and unpredictable way. I would call Yambo Lee's project here tactical spirituality rather than associated with any belief system. Before I mention the second student project, I would like to quickly talk about the connection between archaeology and colonialism. In her book, Dark Continents, Ranjan Nakana mentions the colonial paternal authority of Britain by placing its own nation at one end of the social scale, along with Western Europe and America, and the savage tribes on the other, arranging the rest of mankind within these limits according to as they respond to savage or to cultured life. This is similar to the progressivist structure of Condorcet's definition of spiritual progress. As part of articulating the journey from the primitive to the British in a material way, Hannah states that 19th century archaeology had a mission to save the artifacts. It is this discourse of salvation of the past and of the foreign that links the colonial and the archaeological so forcefully. And it is the fantasy of reenactment through these very artifacts, the material and historical reenactment of Eurocentric identity, that fortifies this way of being in the world and claiming historicity. And with the established veracity of a shared past of classical civilization in the moment of the development of the European nation states, Hannah states an assertion of a self with an evolutionary past that can come to fruition in the present through excavation and restoration was also established, drawing upon a romantic model of European civilization with its roots in ancient Greece. And I just wanted quickly to mention the Elgin marbles, just because it's an interesting topic of debate. And I looked for some of the statements as to why these marbles, for example, should not be returned to Greece. And it's really interesting that what those statements are about. The marbles should remain in the British Museum because Lord Elgin's legal removal saved them from destruction. They are available to a wider public than they would be in Athens, and their return to Greece would set a precedent that would empty many great museums of their collections. Another comment, returning the origin marbles should horrify anyone with even a passing interest in history. It would be an act of vandalism. So it's returning the marbles that's an act of vandalism, based on spurious historical and legal arguments that would fatally undermine a world-leading museum. So apart from the amazing claim of vandalism and destruction, both statements very clearly refer to the museums, and in this case, the British Museum, being undermined as an institution. It seems that it is the Eurocentric identity based on the reenactment of a history preserved through the collection of archaeological artifacts that is more in danger. The artifacts must remain static and safe where they are. So this is the route master bus. I'm going to talk about this second project, obviously a very mobile vehicle. And June Bake from Unit 2, my unit, Reclaim the Commons, has started a bus company called Chihuahua Bus Company. Buses that stop at the Chihuahua Bus Company, bus stops, though, are uniquely different. You may come across a tongue-in-cheek version of a McDonald's bus, or encounter Father Christmas and 3 Rudolphs securely rooted to the ground and subject to the company's bus routes. But the bus that is perhaps closest to today's theme is the one inspired by the British Museum, the one I call British Museum Bus. This bus is filled with selected items from the museum, mummies and other archaeological objects and sculptures from all over the world that reside there. They have been moved from one iconic static institution to a mobile tourist iconic symbol of London. The bus and its objects can also look like a hearse carrying the dead on their final journey of rest. Then again, they can also look like a getaway van with stolen objects being removed to an unknown destination. In the NFT version of the bus, even the digital coffins are eager to get on and gain access to new mobility. Jihoon has taken objects from the ultimate archaeological home of Eurocentric identity, and using another icon, the route master, has created a situation that questions the way museums and other cultural institutions justify their position of objects and artifacts stolen from their locations. Hop on and wait for the conductor to shout, "All change," at the final destination. I'm aware I'm running out of time, so I just wanted to show, this is an iconic image from the Iranian Revolution. It's an unfinished building which is occupied by all the protesters during the revolution. Again, it's almost like in contrast to the staticness of the museum. This is a static building that's occupied by people moving. During the revolution, buildings were burned down, walls were riddled with bullets, decorated with slogans, "Death to, down with, and long live." Cars were set on fire, shop signs were torn off and used as shields. Streets, squares, and boulevards were overrun with people fighting battles with armed soldiers. On a peaceful day, demonstrators placed red carnations inside the barrel of the soldiers' guns. On a violent day, they dipped their hands in the blood of a martyr and marked walls with their imprint. One day in February 1979, thousands climbed onto the unfinished structure of a block of flats. The load-bearing structure and subfloor panels were in place, but there were no interior partitions, no walls. They occupied all 112 spaces on all 5 floors, separated by rolled steel joint beams. This was one of the most striking images of the revolution. Before bedrooms, bathrooms, and kitchens, before water, gas, and electricity, before cutlery and crockery, furniture and floors, and painted walls, before appliances were unpacked and manuals read, the revolution declared that everyone and everything was subject to God's law. And it declared this through public action, occupation of buildings, through carrying out, sometimes literally, what Bernard Tschumi describes as violence against space. So I'm going to end on this image, but also raising the question in the sense that how can architecture, in the way that Eurocentric identity is structured, address the fact that, on the one hand, Eurocentrism offers the possibility of reaching an ideal, but needing always to have an other which can never reach it in order to define itself, also offers a constant obstruction to it.
Thank you.